Welcome to the Level Up Artist Podcast. We are your hosts, Adriana Amay and
Jackie Sanders. We are two art professionals sharing forward the advice and business lessons we have learned along our creative journeys.
We talk to artists, leaders, and art professionals to demystify the creative process and discover new ways to succeed as a career-minded artist.
If you find value in these conversations, please go ahead and subscribe. This will help other creatives like you find our podcast, and you will be notified when we drop a new episode every Tuesday. On today's episode, we are so excited to be joined by a wonderful guest, Wendy White. She is the Development Director at Healing Transitions in Raleigh, North Carolina. After serving Healing Transitions in a variety of volunteer roles, including facilitating art therapy workshops and being the Art of Recovery co-chair, Wendy joined the leadership team in July 2021 as its development director. Her passion for recovery, decades in the making, runs deep. Prior to joining Healing Transitions, she worked across multiple sectors, specializing in sales, marketing, event planning, program development, human resources, and account management. She uses this extensive experience to lead a team responsible for all activities related to development, donor cultivation, major and annual giving, capital campaigns, communication, and community engagement. In addition to this extensive resume, Wendy also is a visual artist, where she uses her art as a means to help people creatively express themselves by sidestepping their inner critic and growing their personal, emotional, and spiritual awareness. So, Wendy, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so our paths officially crossed last year. Adriana and I both have studios downtown, and she came to speak to the artists about their Art of Recovery event that they were doing. And I definitely hopped on the opportunity, one, to participate. And since then, our paths have kept crossing.
Yes. So last year was our first official Art of Recovery, and Jackie, we were so excited to have you there because it was definitely kind of a last minute push because of COVID, and it was an amazing evening. I think better than any of us anticipated. So we've kept in touch over this last year, and this year Jackie is the chairperson of Art of Recovery. So I definitely have just been so fortunate to have you on the team this year, and have loved getting to know you as a marketing person and as an artist, just as like a rock star woman.
Yes, she is. Yes,
you are so sweet.
We'll be super excited to learn more about that. And part of the reason too that we're excited to talk to you in this podcast as well is we both have, as most people do, have a connection with, someone in our life. At least personally, I could say it's in my own family, nuclear family, which have struggles with different kinds of addictions, if you will. So it's interesting to hear from, the perspective of someone that's not just an artist, but someone that also works in that field and kind of where the two intersect. So seeing how those two cross and kind of learning more about your journey, we're super excited about it. But before we deep dive into any of that, let's go ahead and let people know a little bit more about Healing Transitions if they haven't heard about it before. Tell us a little bit more about the institution itself and your role as Director of Development.
Okay, so Healing Transitions is a nonprofit that's been a part of the Raleigh community for 21 years now. We have two campuses. We have a men's campus located on Dix Park, and then we have a women's campus that's in North Raleigh, kind of that is adjacent to Umstead Park. We offer services for people who are experiencing homelessness, who are uninsured or underserved. Our services are on demand, so we are the only operating wet shelter in Wake County, which means if you are actively using, you can come here and we will accept you into the detox program. It's a peer-to-peer model, which means once you've decided that you'd like to stick around and see what recovery is about, you then are the one, as you move through the program, teaching the classes and working in detox. And it really helps the next person that's coming in get that glimmer of hope that they can have what this person standing in front of them leading the way has. So we, again, the services are free to the individual. So we rely heavily on fundraising and funding from the city and the county. We have amazing community support that keeps this place going.
That's absolutely incredible. And I know, especially from working with you the past couple months of planning upcoming events, which we will talk about later, really your campus is absolutely gorgeous. And you can feel that community energy as soon as you walk in the door. And that peer mentorship, I think, is so powerful of seeing people who were in your shoes a month ago or 3 months ago and seeing firsthand just how much your life and mindset can completely transform if you are committed to the process of recovery and
Yeah.
the roller coaster that it can be.
Absolutely. So a couple of things is that our program is not a 30, 60, 90-day program. Our participants can stay as long as it takes. So when they are actually ready to leave, they have, worked through their recovery process. They've built up a network. They've been working, have savings, and they've been connected to healthcare, educational resources. If they're experiencing some kind of legal issues, we've connected them to services for that. And then they're set up in sober living housing. So that, we're not forcing anybody, to move through the program at our pace. They actually are getting to go at their pace.
That's
Which
awesome.
that
And I
is-
like too how you were mentioning that it's not like they're not going to feel that pressure of somebody holier than thou, like they say, of like, oh, I've never been in this position. In fact, the person helping you is someone that was in that position. So with that in mind, would you like, of course, if you want to, share if you also have a connection to addiction and recovery and why you feel pulled towards this mission?
Absolutely. So I myself got sober about 6 years ago. And so of course I, love having purpose-driven work now that, all of the things that are important in my life, sobriety, recovery, helping others and being of service, all kind of have been blended into this one beautiful thing. It's really just such a blessing to me to get to not only practice my own recovery, but like provide a space where others that, they refer to this place as the last place in the block. They don't get to healing transitions because they've had an easy road.
Mhm.
So to be able to provide a really safe space where people can heal and connect with one another and share that common bond of going from complete and utter brokenness to this life that we're given in recovery is I mean just a joy. It doesn't feel like a job. It's like I get to come to work and just be surrounded by miracles all day, and I'm just really humbled to be able to be a part of that, especially as a woman in recovery and having had experienced that brokenness and that utter like desperation for something different.
Yeah. That's amazing. And I think especially through hearing and learning more about your story, as well as what Healing Transitions does, something that's really stuck with me of how important it is, of something that as an organization, you guys always say how as many times as it takes. And so I feel like that's also another amazing differentiator to where program participants, it's at no cost to them. And if depending on where the journey of life takes them, they can come back as many times as it takes to find their recovery and to find sobriety, because life is difficult and life has challenges that are thrown your way. And so knowing that they always have Healing Transitions to lean back on is truly a miracle for some people on their journey.
I couldn't say it any better, Jackie. I think there are lots of preconceived notions about what addiction looks like and how people arrive at that point. And it's different. Everybody's story is different, but I mean the common denominator is that this disease is looked at. I looked at it for years as a moral or a value driven problem that I had, a problem, and I was the problem. I just wasn't trying hard enough. And it wasn't until I was educated by an addiction specialist to really help me understand that my wiring had been changed. Like there was a physiological change in my body that had created, a physical and mental dependency on the substance that in no way was it going to be where it was like, well, Wendy, if you just try hard enough, then you can do it. That there was actually like support needed to work through that. And it's, you take the substance out, but then you're still left with life and all of the things that you were trying to numb out. So relapse is, very common in addiction. And I mean, that can happen in the beginning. It can happen 15 years into sobriety and recovery that you find people relapsing. Life's hard. We all know this. Like doing life can be really difficult and complicated and painful. And so at Healing Transitions, I mean, our mission is as many times as it takes that you need to come here and get support. Our doors are always open.
Yeah. Which is absolutely incredible. And in addition to your professional experience with Healing Transitions, you are also an artist yourself, as we mentioned earlier. So do you mind sharing with us the role that art and being creative has served in your life and how that's been intertwined with your sobriety journey?
So growing up, all I did was paint and draw. And if anybody asked me, Wendy, what do you want to be when you grow up? It was an artist without pause. That's all I knew. That was what my world revolved around. And as I got older, through middle school and high school, I'm a people pleaser, and my people pleasing was definitely just on fire, of course. And there were a couple of moments that happened during that time when people would say, oh, well, Wendy, we're getting our portfolios together for college applications. Are you going to do this? And I had already started to formulate that narrative in my mind that I wasn't good enough.
Oh, no.
Because I was comparing my art to other people that I really admired and thought like, that's amazing. And I can't do that. So therefore I am not good. And instead of the art teacher questioning me or encouraging me when I said, no, I don't think so. I think I'm going to go into biology, which horrible at math and science. I don't understand why anybody was like, yeah, that's a good idea, Wendy. It validated that narrative of you're not good enough. So, for my whole young adult life, everything was immersed. My identity was immersed in, I'm an artist. And then all of a sudden it was, okay, well, you're not going to be, so figure something out. And, you start to become what you think other people want you to be. Mm-hmm. So that you get that validation and makes you feel good in my own head. So through my 20s and 30s, on occasion, I would try to pick it back up, but it always was because I saw someone's art. Like Adriana, your art in the background. I would look at that, be like, oh, I love that. And I would go home and try to replicate that in some way. And of course, wasn't working out. And the narrative in my head would go, that's right, because we told you, you're not any good. Mm-hmm. And I would put it down and would not paint again for years until I was getting sober. And in an act of just complete and utter desperation of needing to do something, besides drinking at night, I started painting. And in that desperation kind of gave me that, like, I don't care what it looks like. I don't even have the energy to admire somebody else's artwork and try and replicate this. I just need to keep my mind and my hands busy so I don't go pick up a bottle tonight. And I started producing work. And all of a sudden I had a whole living room full of canvases. And someone who was in my recovery network, who was an artist, this is what she does as a profession, had messaged me on social media and said, hey, Wendy, I hear that you're painting a lot. Do you mind posting some pictures so I can see your work? And I had become open to taking suggestions. So I did that. And all of a sudden, people started asking if the work was for sale. And, I really like that. And can you do this? And can you do that? And can you tell me more about your process? And it started to validate my creativity. It started to validate who I was as an artist. And this art that I had produced for the first time since I was little was actually the art that I was like, that was authentic. It was an authentic expression of my creativity. So that practice all of a sudden started to become my practice in life. Like, I have to let go of the picture in my head of what I thought my life was going to look like, because I'm sitting here looking at myself in the mirror going, I did not think my life was going to look like an alcoholic, divorced, single mom, trying to figure out how to do the next right thing in my 40s. Like, wow, that's not the picture I had painted for myself. Hello. And this process that I was developing through my painting helped me really, like, in a tangible way, not just it was spiritual as well, but it was spiritual and tangible all together with my hands, like throwing things onto a canvas and watching it evolve and build. I was like, oh my gosh, this is like a direct correlation of what I'm going through in my life right now. And this is serving me in a really positive way. Maybe I should do more of this. Because for the first time in my 40s, I was like, oh, hi, there you are. Like, this feels maybe like the right track for you.
I love that. And I think that's such a common realization moment, whether it happens 6 months of taking a break from your practice, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years. It's that quiet energy that I think is what makes the creative practice so magical, of just being in your studio and in the zone. And you have that time to be in your own head and reflect. And then the painting becomes almost that byproduct of that process of being super present, reconnecting to your authentic self, the child in all of us, so to speak. And I think especially for so many people, whether they're currently battling addiction, or we all have elements in our lives where we feel like we're putting up a facade for who we think we're supposed to be. I think that's a universal theme that so many people can connect to, because you're playing this role that you think you're supposed to want, or what you think other people think you should be. And instead you start, abandoning yourself, abandoning your authentic voice. And the creative practice can be so powerful in bringing you back to that moment and seeing that here we are. Feels right. As crazy as the world can be outside, like, this creative practice is insanely grounding once you find that true voice.
Yeah. And I love what you just said, is where I thrive in the creative process is the process. It's the practice of it. It's really not the end product of it all. It was that process that is where I find a connection to myself and to my higher power, and feel like the most comfortable in my own skin.
Oh, there is so much here that I want to unpack, but then it would be a 4-hour episode. So I'm going to try to keep it brief and just say there are so many parallels that I'm finding even with my own journey. So mine was living with, I'm just going to call him out, my father. Thank you very much. We're just going to go with that. And for me, art was my refuge. It was my sanctuary. It was when he would go nuts. Let's just keep it simple and just it was so frustrating. Anyways, when he would go on one of his rampages, it was like, this is the place I can go to, art. But same with what you were describing, even though I've done art all my life, and I also had the answer, what do you want to be? I was like, artist, but also psychologist, race car driver. Anyways, there were a few other things on the menu, and teacher. Anyways, but artist is like the consistent one. essentially I encountered a lot of the same things you mentioned, where you have, let's call it the skill gap, right? There's what you envision your art should be, but you don't have the technical skill yet. And instead of saying, oh, this is like cooking, you don't learn overnight, you're going to make a few bad dishes before you make something that tastes good and you can cook intuitively without a recipe. Instead, with art, it's like, oh, it didn't work, I suck at this, like that's it, that's the end of the way.
Yes.
And then you kind of, like you said, you create this vicious cycle, narrative spiral situation where you're like, I can't do this because I'm not good enough and I'm not good enough. And it's like, I love how when you were telling your story, and again, there's so many parallels, I absolutely love it. One of the things that turned it around was practice, the word nobody likes to hear. Like once you started creating all those canvases and you started filling your house with them, you started getting better because there is no shortcut. You have to put in the hours for mastery of anything. And I love how you said, like, it turned it around and then you realize, no, this is it. Like, this is a way for us to communicate a lot of times things that we can't verbalize anyway, whether
Mhm.
it's like memories, trauma, different situations, emotions that we have no words for. And it's like, once you learn to translate it through the canvas, I find that the best part about it, it's not the outcome. The outcome belongs to somebody else that will see it, resonated, they have to have it, whether it's aesthetic or as something, a deeper emotional connection. But the healing part for you is the process of making the thing. And it's like just letting it go, editing some of it, and just moving it out.
But yeah, I think so much of what you said, and Adriana was actually the one who mentioned this to me when I was rediscovering my creative voice a few years ago, of really sharing that clarification of the creative process belongs to you, and the end product, that end artwork, it belongs to whoever is meant to own it in the future. And so
Mm.
it's really understanding that as artists, that is the magical time. Yes, when people purchase your artwork, it feels great. Yes, when a new collector has a piece in their home, we love that. But that end product doesn't belong to you. The process belongs to you.
That's beautiful.
And so, how would you say your creative process looks today after rediscovering your practice? What does that look like, and what role does it play in your life now?
So now that it's moved a little bit beyond, like, I'm so desperate not to drink, so I'm going to fill my time with just, doing. Um, it's really become more purpose driven. And that's where I find inspiration. I, when I'm creating a commission, say, like, I love commission work because my practice when I'm doing that is to sit down with a client and really talk through their story. And what kind of music do you love? Tell me about you. Like, what inspires you? What are you afraid of? And just get them talking. And I then am able to kind of translate these things that I've heard, or this theme that I've heard throughout their story, into this like reflection of abstract art for this person. And that really inspires me. I've found that there's this, again, well, I'll put it this way. I still struggle with what I think it should look like
Mhm.
what my practice should look like, what kind of artist I should be, and how often I should be painting and selling
Mhm.
and showing. And because I'm only one person, and I have a big job here, and I have, you know, teenage children, and I have things that I need to be doing. Like, there's not always that time to just create art for the sake of creating art. So, in order to get in more acceptance and authenticity of who I am as an artist today, right now, is like when I have a commission work, I'm inspired. When I'm facilitating a workshop for other people to discover that, like, you are a creative. You are a creative. You've just created a story in your head that has told you if it doesn't look a certain way, then that means you're not any good. And so being able to talk people through that process so that at the end they can go, I had no idea I could do that. I had no idea. Like, I just made this. And it's like, yes, you did. And it's fantastic. and to, kind of coach them through how then they can take what they learned in that process of creating that piece of art. Gosh, like that is what drives me. That's what inspires me. So that is what my art looks like today. And I'm becoming more comfortable and more accepting that there are different seasons.
Yes.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And
It's
your
really
style is
okay.
Yeah, and your style is going to continue to evolve the more you do it anyway. So it's like it may not look exactly the way you imagine at first. It may end up looking different, but that might actually be better. It might be more you as you continue to discover it. And I love how you're also like sharing some of that with other folks as well, because then they learn to basically cultivate that artistic voice too, or rediscover it. They may not have drawn and painted since they were kids. And like discovering that pure satisfaction where it's like you enter this focus mode or the zone, or everybody has a different name for it, right? But for a slight moment, you have this peace, there's respite, and you just get to be present. I mean, it's a mindful practice in many ways. You get to be present, forget some of the other things for a little bit, enjoy yourself, and then whatever the outcome is, if it doesn't look the way you want it to, well, you just take more classes, learn more skills, and continue practicing. Like it's not heart surgery, which is a good thing. So,
Right.
but I'm
Exactly.
interested to hear, like, I love hearing the artist side. I think I'm also hearing parallels too with the recovery side, because just like with the art part, you're helping them rediscover their creativity. It's almost like on the recovery side, you're also helping to rediscover their self-value in a way of like, it is okay, we all mess up. Like this is not like you're not the problem. There are other things involved, some of which you don't really have much control over, and you're not broken just because this happened. Pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and let's find a way forward. So it sounds like it's almost like you're merging both of these two areas into one, which is amazing. I mean, this is how you ended up at Healing Transitions, of course. But I'm curious, what led you to start the program for the Art of Recovery, like the big, the art show slash Healing Transitions kind of event?
So I was introduced to Healing Transitions by being asked to sit on the planning committee as an artist, and then asked to be the co-chair. And through that, they were like, "Oh, wait, you facilitate workshops? Like, would you ever want to do that here for our participants?" And I was like, "Well, of course I would. Thank you." Um, and what I discovered, and what Healing Transitions discovered as an organization, is there has always been a lot of outlets for fitness. I mean, fitness, the F3 community, like they have been amazing to Healing Transitions and really helped facilitate a lot of, mental, physical, and spiritual change. But fitness doesn't necessarily speak to everyone as an outlet. It can be a piece, but maybe that's not really what, you have that moment where you're like, "Oh, here I am." And so the first art workshop that I did was the first time anybody had said, "Hey, does anyone want to come and paint?" And there was a lot of hesitation, because in a lot of, conversations around, "Well, I don't know how to, I never have, that wouldn't be for me," which was exactly why these workshops were the best for this particular population, because it was like, right, you haven't ever. So let's try something new, because the things that we have been doing in our lives maybe haven't been working the best for us. So, and then they're like, "Okay, you're right. So maybe I'll try something new."
Yeah.
And watching that first group go through a 3-day workshop and cry, support one another, bring out, conversations with one another that were just beautiful and supportive and challenging. Because in the workshops, when I see people starting to try to paint something specific, I make them cover it up and start over. Because I'm like, "Nope." Or they'll say, "Hey, can you teach me, how to draw a tree? Because I was really thinking like over in this area it would be," and I'm like, "No, I will not. I will not teach you how to paint anything. I'm going to talk you through a process of letting go of what you want this to look like. And so having them be able to practice pausing, walking away, shaking things up, like getting out of your own mind and just having fun with it. I don't let them use paintbrushes. Like everything that they traditionally thought a painting class was going to look like, I undo for them, because we have all of these like traditional values of life that we are taught that, and like, this is supposed to be this, and you're supposed to be that. And this is how, the world works, and we all just live happily ever after. And that is such BS. That is like not the way things work out. And we're all left like going, what the heck? I'm trying so hard here. And I'm doing all of these things that were handed to me, and it's not working. So it must be me. Something must be really wrong with me. And so through these workshops, I'm able to say, like, this is working for you. Like, let all of these layers that we're building on this canvas, like, reveal a picture. Because as humans, like, oh my gosh, we're so layered and multifaceted, like go through all these different experiences that don't happen like this. It's a lifetime to get to this beautiful, messy, layered, crazy, expression of our story. And for me as an artist, being able to facilitate that for people who are, in so much pain, and able to discover some peace. And when someone at the end of the 3 hours says to me, for the first time, I can remember, did not think about using for the last 3 hours. I'm like, there it is.
Success.
Yep, it's
Yeah.
that spot.
Yes, because that's what art, all versions of art can give us. Like, it's just this, gateway into this, like, the goodness and the sweetness of life and the joy of life, through the creative process.
Oh, yes. It's so good.
I absolutely love that. I feel like this is like a mic drop moment, and truly like a testament to how powerful art can be. And so then after jumping off with those workshops, you then were part of the planning for the Art of Recovery original event. So how did that leap take place? And of course, as a featured artist at last year's event, I can say it was absolutely incredible. And all of these stories and emotions and these powerful moments really did translate at the event. So can you tell us more about that process and what really ignited the thought and desire to expand upon these workshops and make art more part of the program that you guys have?
Well, I mean, the driving force behind a lot of it is our program is free to our participants, and we serve over 300 people a day. And right now, the average cost is $58 a day for the program. So that money has to come from somewhere.
Very true. Very true.
And again, like, we are supported in all of these different avenues, but there was not a pathway to the like creative community to make people aware that there are services here, because a lot of artists and musicians suffer from addiction issues. I mean, it's just how it is. And so, wanting to broaden the reach of the mission for people who may know someone that needs help, may potentially one day need help themselves, and to, really reach out and build bridges with that community of potential donors as well, of people who support the arts and support community efforts. And I mean, that's what we're all about, is just building community here. And I will say, I agree with you, Jackie. Last year's event, the sense of community, the sense of, these artists who maybe are not in recovery themselves, but worked alongside participants. And like the synergy between the two, the participants getting to feel just a part of the community, the broader community. Like, I'm not here as a participant tonight. I'm here as an artist. I am here as a poet, being vulnerable and getting on stage and sharing my heart with what ended up being 500 people. So, last year we really looked at art of recovery as being a friends raising of, hey, artist community, creative community, here we are, we're HT. We'd love to have you come in and help facilitate creative outlets for our participants, because the benefit is truly like life changing. And then seeing, our participants get to take that participant hat off and just be one of many in this creative community was like beyond anything that I thought was going to happen that night. People who were not in recovery, who were there, were, some of the things I heard were like, I go to these things all the time. I'm an artist and I participate in shows and festivals and pop-ups. And let me tell you, I've never experienced like the energy that is going on in this room. And it's just evolved since then. It's grown, and people are connecting to it and wanting to support it. And so this year, is just grown legs and is like running away from us, because it's just this amazing thing that is going to be happening on October 26th. I'm so excited about, and it creates a certain energy on the campuses, because it's not just about, okay, well, we need you to paint a picture. There's always a theme. Like, I want you to paint what recovery looks like to you. And that can be, writing it out on the canvas. It can be making a collage. It can be abstract. So you have that avenue of visual art. And then you have people that are like, well, I just want to sing one or two songs.
Nice.
Bring it. The talent is real. And then you have people who, which I can't even imagine this, like are writing the most amazing poetry and are like, okay, I'm okay getting in front of a crowd, and I'm gonna stand up there and I'm gonna share this.
Wow.
Like,
so brave.
Amazing. Let's do it. So yeah, it's something that is beyond my wildest dreams, and to get to work with other artists and dancers and vocalists that are all like inspired by our mission, believe in what we do, and believe in this, sense of community that we're trying to build.
Yeah. And I know, especially as an artist who kind of was a little bit behind the scenes last year, but more so there as a participant. I was just introduced to HT at the time and still kind of getting a feel of what you guys were about or what these events were. Because as someone who's very fortunate enough to have a studio that's already community facing, I don't really do markets. I very rarely have to move my artwork outside of my studio. And so that was even just a new experience in general for me, of showing at a place that's not my comfort of my studio. And so really experiencing that magic of the event planted that seed to where you're absolutely right. I feel like for the event this year, now being more hands-on with the planning, we saw these little glimpses of power and magic. And then it's like, how can we magnify that? But there were so many of those moments. And when they're all magnified, of, like you were saying, the spoken word, poetry, music, visual art, and how can we then grow all of those voices together? I'm so excited for the event this year, because and that's very intentional with our planning of how many forms of personal expression can we incorporate into this event? Because just as the path of recovery looks different for everyone, so does everyone's creative voice, and whatever will speak to donors or sponsors or maybe participants, future participants of the program who currently know they need HT services or might not be aware yet. They'll remember that power and that magic of, well, that's the kind of community I know I want to go to, or I know I want to support for these services in the future. So we're so excited for this year's. And of course, for all of our podcast listeners, We will have information about the event, the Art of Recovery, linked in the show notes. But if you are in the Raleigh-Durham area, the event will be on October 26th from 6 to 9 p.m. at Dorothea Dix Park Chapel. And we are still looking for donors and sponsors if you are listening to this podcast before the event. And so you'll have links in the show notes about how you can get involved and support this amazing event, but also healing transitions at large.
Yeah, absolutely. But before we get to a little bit more of that and how people can get involved, Wendy, I do want to ask you, this is a question we ask most of the folks that we have on the podcast. From your perspective, as your, artist journey continues to evolve and whatnot, how would you define success as an artist? Perspective.
So I think success as an artist, is a practice of authenticity and like authentic self-expression. And I don't think that the way our society is kind of built right now, that we freely inspire that in people. So for me, I think success is measured on how often you're connecting with others and having vulnerable conversations, and how you yourself, like for me, meditation is a big part of being able to live an authentic life. And so if I don't practice that on a regular everyday basis, I slide back into that. I need to look a certain way. My life needs to look a certain way. My art needs to look a certain way. And you know what that does? It like freezes me up. And like, I'm not creative. I don't feel good physically or emotionally or spiritually. So I think that practice of authenticity is truly what for me measures my success, and what I try to encourage other people is to let go of like what you think art and life is supposed to look like, because you're always chasing after something that's not even real. It's this moments of connection, whether it's through listening to music or reading poetry or looking at a beautiful painting, that like that's the connection. Like that's, the success in giving yourself permission to have those types of experiences with yourself, like of giving yourself that gift. Because when you're practicing self-love and self-acceptance in that way, it opens the door to a greater like peace and connection to everything. So I think that would be my measure of success these days.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So what is one piece of advice that you wish you had heard before you got started on your creative journey?
Oh, I wish I would have heard and really heard. Doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. It doesn't matter. And it really, truly doesn't matter. I mean, as long as you're finding your purpose. We were having this conversation this week, like purpose versus passion, and what drives you. And I have found in my own journey that, having purpose facilitates passion in me, and keeps me moving forward. And so I wish that I would have learned that a little earlier, because I was very much caught up. And again, I think this is kind of what we're taught. Like, your house is supposed to look this way, and relationships are supposed to look this way, and you're supposed to have 2 kids and the dog and the cat, and all of these parts make up your worth, right? That's what makes you worthwhile in life. And that is such nonsense, I have found. And I personally unraveled to the point of addiction, because that's exhausting, like trying to fit into all of that is,
It's someone else's mold, and it's a generic one at that.
it sure is. And it doesn't, one size does not fit all of what is going to give you purpose in life.
And it's outdated. It's like a 1950s Good Housekeeping magazine, like
it is. It's Betty Crocker cookbooks.
Yeah, that's it. It's so good.
It's all of those things. And so our parents were taught that. And then in my generation, it started this, you can be anything. You can be all of the things.
But
like, I'm sorry. I think you can be all of the things that you want to be. Like you were saying, race car driver, artist, biologist. You can be all of those things in different seasons of your life.
Yeah.
But the reality is, like, I like to think that I'm like superhuman and I can do all of the things. And I struggle with that.
Yeah.
And so when all of a sudden I find myself completely exhausted, I'm thinking I'm doing something wrong. Like, man, I'm just not doing my job well enough. I'm not parenting good enough. And it's like, well, wait, I am only one person.
Yeah.
And right now, like, this is what this looks like. And that's okay. Like, that's okay that maybe I'm only creating a couple of commissions a year.
Yeah.
Like, would I like to do more? Do I think but it becomes this, well, I think I should be doing more, or I shouldn't call myself an artist.
And I think it's that shift of, I think you nailed it when you said, oh, you can be anything you want to be. Somewhere along the path, I think that message got like warped for a lot of people. Of then we felt like we have to be everything that we can be at the same time. Like,
and only if you make money.
Right. And make all the money.
Right. And you have to make money, but also you need to volunteer and do this and show up for relationships and have a clean house and also relax. Like, I feel like even now, like, self-care has gotten that stigma of, like, at least from the messaging from a lot of my peers that we're getting thrown of, like, and almost like self-care then becomes this obligation thing that you have to do. Like, you have to like wear a face mask and relax and do yoga and be in a hammock once a week. Like, it's like everything's so regulated and mandated, but you're like, can all of these voices just be silenced and me figure out what I want to do and
I need
put those expectations on the back burner?
I'm about to say something that I'm sure a lot of your listeners cannot relate to, but becoming an alcoholic, hitting bottom, and then living a sober life in recovery is the best thing that ever happened to me, because you are taught it's one day at a time. One day you have right now. And so in order to grow in that, you have to like live in that and practice that. And so it gives you that ability of all of a sudden, like, that joy is sparked because a certain song came on, and you can just be in the moment and enjoy that and move on, because there's going to be lots of other moments of hardship and or like focus or being of service and somebody needing like a million different things from you are all going to happen in one day. But for me, being a sober woman today, it means I can show up like just in that moment and practice not feeling like I have to be all of the things right now for everybody. And that is not how I'm wired. That is not my go-to. But practicing that as a recovery practice and as a spiritual practice has given me a life of freedom in so many ways that I'm so thankful for.
Yeah. I mean, that reframe, that's a 180 essentially. Like you said, it's just at the bottom and then the only way left is up. So I love hearing that. But that one of the other questions we like to ask our guests is, if you had $100 right now, what would you splurge on or invest in? But the caveat is it has to be something that brings you joy, and relates to your art or business or even personal growth.
Okay, so one of my very favorite places in the world is to go walk around Jerry's. And like I would splurge on like really beautiful oil pastels. There are
Ooh,
so many different ones from like
some
where is that
sunny
from?
days.
Yeah. I mean, like to me, like I get giddy being in that aisle and just getting to, play and think about different colors that inspire me. That and like paper,
Yeah.
really good paper that when you put it all together, like it's just feels good. It looks, it doesn't always look good, but it all kind of comes together in this like fun, lovely, like few minutes that you get to spend just playing with,
And being present.
yeah, being present with really beautiful, expensive oil pastels.
That can be a scary thing, being very present in an art store, because then you're like, I need this in my life. I need this in my life. Sometimes a little awareness in those situations, that's very dangerous.
It is dangerous. So if it was somebody else's $100, I'm like, that is where I would go. And that is what I would do if I had to have it be, an expression of my creativity. I love
the wallet in the car.
Like
yeah.
Awesome. I love that. Well, Wendy, this has been absolutely incredible. For our listeners, how can they stay in touch with you and learn more about Healing Transitions?
So definitely getting online, going to healingtransitions.org. You can learn more about us. We have an events page, so you can stay connected to all of the different events that are coming up and what may speak to you to get involved in. My contact information is there as well. We are open 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So anytime anybody wants to, within business hours, stop in for a tour and just, kind of see what we're all about and walk the grounds, because we're so fortunate to have, Thomas Sayre built our courtyard. And
that's awesome.
I mean, it's a special place. So I encourage people to give me a call and set up a tour and come out and see what we're all about.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to take you up on that. I haven't been there yet, although I'll be for the event. So I'm looking forward to that. So thanks again for being, here on the podcast with us. This has been a delightful conversation. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for lifting up, the voice of Healing Transitions and believing in our mission and, supporting other artists and giving me a voice. So thank you.
Of course. And for our listeners, of course, all the information that we talked about today will be linked in today's episode notes, as well as our blog where you can find show notes, more information about Wendy, Healing Transitions, and the Art of Recovery event coming up in October.
Absolutely. And if you want to stay in contact with us in between episodes, I'm at Art across all platforms.
And I'm at J Sanders Studio on all platforms. And if you want to follow the podcast, we are at Level Up Artists on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.